The Young and the Restless Spoilers. Under the weight of silence and secrets, Genoa City once again trembled beneath the shadow of greed, betrayal, and the ghosts of the past. Jill Abbott, a woman who had built her life upon resilience and reinvention, now stood at the edge of revelation. For decades she had watched empires rise and crumble, men fall from power, and loyalties shift like desert sand, but nothing prepared her for the truth about Cain Ashby. The charming, deceptive man she had once trusted as part of her inner circle was not merely a manipulator or a corporate schemer, he was a thief of legacies, a forger of bloodlines, and the silent architect of one man's ruin. The man he destroyed was none other than Colin Atkinson, a devilish rogue who had danced on the edge of morality all his life, but who, in his final days, sought redemption and peace. Jill's world turned to ash when she uncovered the truth. Cain had forced Colin to sign a fraudulent will, one he neither read nor understood, transferring the entirety of his wealth, properties, and international accounts to Cain. The move transformed Cain into a billionaire overnight, but it came at a price, the life and dignity of the man who had once been both his father and his victim. The discovery was not born from gossip or speculation, it came from the testimony of a forgotten witness. A man who had seen it all, who had served Colin faithfully in his final months while he languished in a villa outside Nice, far from the chaos of Genoa City. That witness, a frail yet sharp-minded caretaker named Laurent, had watched as Cain arrived one night under the guise of reconciliation, only to leave hours later with documents that would rewrite history. The next morning, Colin was found unconscious, and within days, he was gone. His death was ruled natural, but now, Jill knew better. For months, Jill kept this secret buried deep, afraid of what it would unleash, until a new piece of the puzzle emerged. One that would blow the doors off Cain's carefully constructed empire. Her search through old legal archives and international estate records uncovered something extraordinary. Colin Atkinson had a daughter, hidden away in Europe, far from the scandals of Genoa City. Her name was Sienna Bacall. Her existence had been wiped from official records, protected by Colin himself after a devastating affair decades ago. She was the product of a love he could never publicly claim, a daughter who grew up without her father's name, unaware of the fortune that was rightfully hers. Sienna was everything her father wasn't: refined, strategic, but burning with a quiet fury. Jill found her in Nice, a woman cloaked in elegance and intelligence, her eyes the same piercing blue as Colin's. When Jill told her the truth about her father's death, the forged will, and the betrayal that had robbed her of her inheritance, the composure on Sienna's face fractured. That night marked the beginning of a war. Jill returned to Genoa City armed with evidence, copies of bank transfers, property deeds, and the damning video recording Laurent had made the night Cain visited Colin. Yet she knew exposing Cain would be dangerous. His power had grown beyond what anyone imagined, his influence stretching through corporate corridors and financial institutions. He had allies who owed him fortunes and enemies too afraid to speak. But Jill was no stranger to danger. She knew that if she let fear dictate her moves, Colin's soul would never rest. Sienna's arrival changed everything. The young woman was not just determined to reclaim what was hers, she was prepared to dismantle Cain's empire piece by piece. Under Jill's mentorship, she began gathering a team of international lawyers and investigators, determined to reopen Colin's estate case in France, where the fraudulent documents were notarized. But Cain, sensing the threat, struck first. He sent emissaries to Nice, bribed officials, and tried to erase the trail leading to the original will. It was a battle fought not only in courtrooms but in the shadows, where secrets were currency and betrayal was law. Jill found herself reliving her own past, years of manipulation and deceit, the endless dance of power between her and Colin. But this time was different. This time, she was driven not by pride or revenge, but by justice, for Colin, and for the daughter he never got to love. The confrontation between Jill and Cain came in the grand boardroom of Chancellor Industries. The air was thick with history, portraits of the company's founders watching from the walls as Jill stood tall, her voice steady. She declared that she had enough proof to expose everything: the falsified signatures, the offshore accounts, the coercion that turned Colin's estate into Kane's empire. For a brief moment, Kane faltered, his carefully constructed mask cracking as Jill laid the evidence on the table. But Kane was cunning. He claimed that Colin had voluntarily given him the estate as reparation for years of betrayal, that it was Colin's way of making peace. Jill's laughter, bitter and raw, echoed through the room. "Peace?" she asked coldly. "You call theft and deceit peace?" Behind the scenes, Sienna watched, silent and calculating. She had spent weeks preparing her next move, and now she was ready. In her possession was something neither Kane nor Jill had anticipated, a confession. Before his death, Colin had recorded a final message addressed to his daughter. In it, he admitted his fear of Kane, his regrets, and his longing to make things right. That recording, authenticated and time-stamped days before his death, would become the ultimate weapon. When Sienna revealed it publicly, broadcasting it during a live press conference intended for Kane's latest corporate announcement, the fallout was catastrophic. Within hours, Chancellor Industries stock plummeted, Kane's accounts were frozen pending investigation, and the public turned against him. Genoa City was ablaze with gossip and outrage. Jill watched from a distance as the man who once strutted with arrogance now faced ruin. But her victory felt hollow. The cost of truth was steep. Colin was still gone, and the revelation of his secret daughter had opened old wounds that could never fully heal. Sienna, despite winning back her father's fortune, felt no triumph. Money could not fill the void of lost years. In the quiet aftermath, she sat beside Jill in the Chancellor mansion, staring into the fire. The older woman understood her pain too well. Both had loved Colin in their own ways, both had been betrayed by him, and both had been forced to confront the ugly truth that love and greed often shared the same face. The world outside moved on, but for Jill, this was not an ending, it was a reckoning. Kane would likely fight back, perhaps appeal, perhaps twist the narrative again, but it no longer mattered. The truth was out. The Atkinson fortune had been reclaimed by blood, and Sienna Bacall had stepped into the light as the rightful heir to a legacy that nearly vanished in lies. Yet as night fell over Genoa City, Jill couldn't shake one thought: if Kane had managed to steal an empire once, what was he still hiding? There were rumors of another document, a backup plan, a coded file that Colin had mentioned before his death, something so powerful it could destroy not just Kane, but anyone who dared uncover it. For now, though, Jill and Sienna rested, their uneasy alliance bound by vengeance and grief. They had restored justice in the name of a man both loved and hated, but in Genoa City, peace was always temporary. Every secret exposed only led to another waiting to detonate. And as the storm gathered beyond the mansion gates, one truth remained certain: the ghost of Colin Atkinson was far from finished with them. In the glimmering light of the French Riviera, Nice became the new battlefield for a war that was never meant to be public. Jill Abbott's arrival in the city was not a quiet one. Whispers filled the marble corridors of luxury hotels and government offices. The American matriarch had come to bring down a monster. Kane Ashby had grown too powerful, too untouchable, his fortune carved from deceit and blood. He had manipulated systems, destroyed reputations, and silenced anyone who dared to oppose him. Jill had watched from a distance as his empire expanded across continents, every deal sealed with corruption. Now, as his influence reached into European finance and beyond, she knew she couldn't wait any longer. This was not just revenge, it was survival. She carried with her a suitcase of secrets, a dossier filled with evidence, and beside her stood the one woman whose existence threatened to unravel Kane's entire life, Sienna Bacall. Sienna was a mystery wrapped in elegance and danger. To the world, she was Colin Atkinson's estranged daughter, but in private circles, whispers questioned whether she was real at all. Some said Jill had created her, a ghost made flesh, designed to lure Kane into a legal trap. But if Sienna was a fabrication, she was an extraordinary one. She spoke with conviction, carried an uncanny resemblance to Colin in her features, and possessed documents that seemed impossible to falsify: a birth certificate issued in Monaco under Colin's alias, a DNA test linking her to Jill's former lover, and a trail of financial records showing monthly payments from a secret Atkinson trust. Every piece of paper carried the weight of authenticity, but the more evidence surfaced, the more tangled the truth became. Was Sienna truly Colin's daughter, or the weapon Jill had forged to destroy Kane from within? The courtroom in Nice became the stage for a trial that the press dubbed the battle for the Atkinson legacy. On one side stood Jill and Sienna, flanked by a team of international lawyers and forensic experts. On the other stood Kane, calm, composed, his arrogance cloaked beneath a veneer of civility. He had hired the best defense money could buy, and every move he made was strategic, deliberate, and cruel. The charges were devastating: fraud, coercion, financial manipulation, and inheritance theft. Jill's legal team presented the first wave of evidence: Colin's forged will. The signature had been verified by multiple handwriting experts who confirmed the irregularities in the pen strokes. Then came the video testimony of Laurent, the caretaker who had witnessed Kane's final visit to Colin's villa. The recording showed Kane leaving late at night, his demeanor cold, while Colin appeared disoriented and fearful. Within days, Colin was dead. The evidence sent a ripple through the courtroom, but Kane merely smirked, as though watching amateurs attempt to destroy a king. But Jill wasn't done. She produced financial statements linking Kane to a series of offshore accounts created days after Colin's death. Millions had been funneled into shell companies in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore, money that matched the estimated value of Colin's assets. Every transfer bore Kane's authorization code. The courtroom fell silent as the numbers spoke louder than words. Yet Kane's lawyers were quick to strike back, suggesting that Colin had gifted the money voluntarily, a final act of reconciliation. They claimed the will was legitimate and that Colin had suffered cognitive decline, not coercion. Their argument was polished and ruthless, but Jill's fury was unstoppable. She stood and declared in a trembling voice that she had been there in Colin's final months, that she had seen the fear in his eyes every time Kane's name was mentioned. Her voice, filled with the pain of betrayal, echoed in the marble hall until even the judge lowered his gaze. Then came the most explosive piece of evidence: Sienna's DNA results. The lab report, notarized and certified in Monaco, confirmed a 99.8% match with Colin's genetic material obtained from preserved hospital records. The courtroom erupted. Cameras flashed, journalists shouted questions, and Kane's confident smirk vanished for the first time. If Sienna was indeed Colin's daughter, then she was the rightful heir, and everything Kane had stolen would revert to her under French and international law. But Kane was not a man easily defeated. He demanded an independent test, claiming the samples had been tampered with. Jill agreed, knowing the risk, but also knowing the truth had to withstand scrutiny. Days later, the independent test confirmed the same result. Kane's empire began to crumble. Behind the public spectacle, however, darker truths began to emerge. Some of Jill's closest associates started to question the timing of Sienna's appearance. How had Jill found her so quickly? Why had no record of her existed before Colin's death? The whispers grew louder: perhaps Sienna was not Colin's child, but rather a woman recruited by Jill to impersonate one, armed with fabricated documents and synthetic DNA evidence. The theory was outrageous, yet not impossible. Jill had always been capable of manipulation when the end justified the means. Even Sienna seemed uncertain at times, haunted by questions she could not answer about her own past. She had memories of being raised by a woman named Mireille in France, told only that her father was a man of secrets. Could Jill have found her, shaped her, and used her as a weapon? The doubt gnawed at her soul. The climax came during the trial's final week. Kane, desperate and cornered, presented his own piece of evidence, a recorded phone call allegedly between Jill and Sienna, discussing fabricating lineage. The recording, though partially distorted, painted Jill as the mastermind of an elaborate fraud. The courtroom descended into chaos. For hours, lawyers argued over authenticity. Experts were called to verify the audio, but the results were inconclusive. The damage, however, was done. Jill's credibility was fractured. Sienna, standing beside her, felt the ground collapse beneath her feet. Was she merely a pawn in someone else's war? In the silence that followed, she turned to Jill, her expression unreadable, and for the first time, Jill saw doubt in the eyes of the woman she had fought so hard to protect, or to use. The final verdict was deferred. The judge ordered a full investigation into both sides. While Kane's accounts were frozen and his reputation tarnished, he remained technically free, smirking as he left the courthouse. Jill retreated to her hotel suite, exhausted, her hands trembling as she stared at the Riviera skyline. Sienna entered quietly, holding a letter. It was sealed with an old wax emblem, Colin's crest. Inside was a short note, written in his hand, recovered from a safety deposit box opened that morning. To my daughter, if you ever find this, know that I tried to protect you. The man who betrayed me will fall, but the woman who saves you may not be who she claims to be. Trust your heart, not her promises. The words burned through Sienna's mind. She looked at Jill, who froze as she realized what the letter implied. For the first time, Jill's confidence shattered. Was Colin warning Sienna about her? Had she crossed a moral line so deep that even justice had turned its back on her? Sienna's eyes hardened. You used me, she whispered, not aloud, but in the way her silence accused. She walked away, leaving Jill alone in the echo of her choices. Outside, reporters clamored for statements, headlines screamed of fraud, and Kane declared victory in the press, calling the entire case a witch hunt built on desperation. But beneath his arrogance, fear lingered. He knew the truth was still out there, hidden in documents, memories, and the conscience of one woman who refused to give up. As night descended over Nice, Jill stood on the balcony of her suite overlooking the sea, the waves below crashing like the ghosts of the past. She had waged wars before, lost fortunes, and survived betrayal, but this was different. This battle had consumed her soul. Whether Sienna was real or an invention, she had become part of Jill's legacy, a mirror reflecting all the lies she once condemned. The trial was not over. Appeals would follow, more evidence would surface, and somewhere in the ruins of truth, justice waited to be reborn. For now, Jill whispered to the darkness, Kane will fall. Even if it destroys me. And perhaps that was the truest thing she had ever said. The city of Nice slept under the glow of its coastal lights, unaware that history had just shifted within its courtrooms. Jill's fury had ignited a chain of events that could no longer be contained. Sienna Bacall, real or fabricated, had become a force of her own, a woman caught between truth and invention, between revenge and redemption. And Kane Ashby, the man who once thought himself untouchable, now faced a reckoning that would follow him across oceans. The war was far from over. It had only just begun, and its next chapter would decide not only who inherited Colin Atkinson's fortune, but who survived the legacy of his sins.